You are welcome to Corruption by Association Part 2, and today our focus will be on the biblical patriarch Judah, and our text will be taken from Genesis chapter 38 verse 15 to 16. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come into you," for he did not know that she was a daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" This story captures the encounter between Judah and his daughter-in-law called Tamar. And verse number 1 makes us aware that Judah had separated himself from his brothers in Shechem and had gotten himself involved with a friend called Hiran in a land called Adullam. And Adullam was a Canaanite land. So putting it in a spiritual perspective, Judah separated himself from the church, separated himself from the people of God, separated himself from the community of God, and was united with Hiran, a subject of a Canaanite land. And he left his brothers, went to dwell in the land of Adullam, the Canaanite land of Adullam, which is a representation of the world. So, in a nutshell, Judah left the church and went to live with a friend in the world. Now, verse number 12 says that at a point in the life of Judah, Judah lost his wife and had mourned for his wife for a year. And after the mourning, he decided to resume business. So he was on his way to a city called Timnah. That was where his business was. And the business was the rearing of sheep. And the purpose of this particular visit was to go and share his sheep. And sharing is the taking off of the fleece of the sheep. And this was done every year. So he was on this mission. And the Bible says that his friend Hiran was with him in this mission. Now remember, Hiran had succeeded in taking Judah away from the church. And this time around, when Judah was pursuing business, Hiran was with him. So Hiran had influenced the spirituality of Judah. And now in verse 12, he's getting involved in his business. So he had taken control of his spirituality. And here in verse 12, he's also taking control of his business. Ladies and gentlemen, there are some associations that if you get yourself involved, it has the power to control your spirituality, the power to control your relationship with God. It has the power to control your business. It has the power to control your marriage. It has the power to control your mindset. It has the power to control your philosophy. It has the power to control your worldview. Hiram took Judah away from the church, away from the community of God. And now he's with him when Judah is pursuing business. The Bible says that he went to Timnah to share his sheep, and Hiran was with him. And verse number 13 to 16 makes us aware that when Tamar, the daughter-in-law of Judah, found out that Judah was on his way to Timnah for business, the Bible says she disguised herself like a prostitute and positioned herself on the way to Timnah in a city called Enaim, which means an open area. So Tamar positioned herself and pretended to be a prostitute. and decided to use herself as a bait to Judah. Now, this raised the question that why would she disguise herself in the form of a prostitute to trap Judah? Why would you use an alcohol as a trap for someone if the person was not alcoholic? Why would you use money as a trap for someone if that person was not a thief? As the old adage goes, the nature of the bait determines the taste of the victim. Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute because she knew that prostitution was a good taste for Judah. So when Judah's wife died, Judah resorted to prostitution. And Tamar knew the taste of her father-in-law. And so she disguised herself accordingly and strategically positioned herself to entrap Judah. And ladies and gentlemen, lo and behold, Judah was entrapped. But it comes as no surprise that Judah fell a victim to this conception. Why? Because Judah was with his friend Hiram. Ladies and gentlemen, your association determines your response to temptation. Your association determines your response to temptation. Because at that point in time, Judah was with Hiram, who has been a bad influence in the life of Judah, right from the verse number 1. Hiram took care of the spirituality of Judah, got himself involved in the business of Judah, and now Judah is being tempted with prostitution. And Hiram was with him. And the Bible says that when Judah saw Tamar, Judah was enticed. And Judah was driven towards Tamar. Judah negotiated with Tamar, and Judah eventually slept with Tamar. And ladies and gentlemen, Judah, upon negotiation, had to release his cord, his staff, and his signet ring to Tamar as a pledge to that transaction. Now, the cord, the signet, and the staff were meant for the business mission. Because remember, Judah was on his way to Timnah for business. And the items that was in his possession were meant for the business. But because of prostitution, those items did not get to their destination. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes your association can corrupt your business. Your association can corrupt your church. It can corrupt your desire for God. Your association can corrupt your happiness. It can corrupt your finance. It can corrupt your life. It can corrupt your family. Because those 3 items were not meant for Tamar. They were meant for business. But because of wrong association, Judah succumbed to the temptation of prostitution and lost those items that were initially meant for business. I know of someone who went to the bank to clear his salary, and on his way home, he met his friend. And the friend was a bad associate. On his way, when he met the friend convinced him into a betting shop. And this friend was able to influence this guy, that he lost everything at the betting shop. So he came out with nothing. Now, the purpose of the salary was not meant for betting. It was meant for the upkeep of his home. But on his way from the bank to the house, he was intercepted by a friend. He was intercepted by a wrong associate. He was intercepted by a corrupt subject who led him into the betting shop, and this guy ended up losing everything. The same way, the items that were in Judah's possession were meant for business. But he was intercepted by the temptation of prostitution. And he was led on by his friend Hiram. And in the process, he lost those items. Your association is very, very crucial to your future. Because the future of Judah at that particular circumstance was to go and resume duty as normal in Timnah. His focus from home was towards Timnah. But he was intercepted. I pray that you will never be intercepted by any corrupt friend of yours in any significant, important business that you set your eyes upon. The verse number 20 is also revealing that when Judah decided to retrieve his items from Tamar, it was his friend Hiram that he sent. So Hiram did not only aid the evil act of Judah, but here he's abetting the climax of the act. He was helping Judah to close up the deal. Hiram separated him from his brothers, separated him from the church, separated him from his business, separated him from the things of God, separated him from prayer, separated him from the reading of the Bible, separated him from his piety, from his love for God, from his commitment to the things of God. He was able to intercept his visit to his business. He aided in the acts of prostitution. And he's also helping here in verse number 20, the climax of this evil act. Who is the hero in your life? Who is the hero in your life? Because the hero in your life has the tendency of drawing you away from God and the things of God, has the tendency to obstruct your business life, tendency to obstruct your social life, tendency to obstruct your spiritual life. And here, Hiram has also become the instrument or the vehicle of the accomplishment of an evil act that Judah had initiated. The Hiram in your life can corrupt you. The Hiram in your life can corrupt your business, can corrupt your finance, can corrupt your way of life, can corrupt your worldview, can corrupt your philosophy, can corrupt your outlook in life. I'm going to read two scriptures to you. Two scriptures. The first one is Proverbs chapter 1 verse 10. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 10. It says that here's Solomon's advising his son. He says that, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Here Solomon is providing a warning against wrong association or corrupt association. He's warning his son that if sinners entice you, do not consent. The second text is from 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 34, verse 33 and 34. I read, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Awake to righteousness and do not sin, for some do not have the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. Paul is advising the church in Corinth that evil company corrupts good habits. As Judah's evil company with Hiram corrupted his good habits, corrupted his mindset, corrupted his spirituality, corrupted his relationship with God. Paul is here warning the church in Corinth that they should not be deceived, for evil company corrupts good habits. And he continues in verse number 34. He says, awake to righteousness, irrespective of how you have been entrapped, irrespective of how you have been corrupted by evil association. Paul is saying to you, awake to righteousness and do not sin. For some do not have the knowledge of God. I do speak this to your shame. Awake unto righteousness, for evil communication corrupts good habits. I pray that you find a place in your life to stand against any evil association in your life that is corrupting your walk with God, corrupting your relationship with God, relationship with your families, relationship with your business, relationship with your way of life. May God come through for you and may He be your helper. I pray that you arise unto righteousness and be attached unto God. May God richly bless you for your time. Again, this is Dr. Nats. I pray that you continue to follow and your knowledge in the Lord will never be the same. God bless you and enjoy the rest of your day. Shalom.